Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is CIndy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hello, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
Welcome back. We record these ahead of time, right? And so when this releases, it's the second week of June.
Yeah.
I hope we're having good weather. I really do.
By then we should be.
I really hope that you're listening to this or watching us on YouTube and it's good weather.
Yeah.
If not, it's definitely coming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's never going to stay like this forever.
All right. But I do hope it's good.
I hope it is
we
too.
we want to recognize some people, as we have been doing at the beginning of our episodes, because I know that there are people who get a kick out of it. Maybe your location will come up eventually too.
Yes. Today we're shouting out Poland.
Hello, Poland.
Everyone.
One of my children was not too long ago in Poland, I think.
Oh, interesting. I've never been there, but I've always wanted to see it. And we're also shouting out Washington, D.C.
Love me some Washington, D.C. From where we live, we can take the Amtrak.
Oh, yeah, we can. Yeah.
It's a great Amtrak ride to D.C. I've done it with my husband, and I've done it professionally for conferences that take place in D.C.
Yeah.
I also have a cousin in D.C., so hi, if you're there. Probably not, but hey, they don't have children yet.
Yeah.
But maybe someday you will be listening. You'll be like, you'll have children. You'll be like, my cousin has a podcast about children. Then I'm going to shout you out. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, shout us out years ago. So hello. So thank you for listening. Spread the word around Poland and Washington, D.C. that we are here and that you enjoy this podcast. Mm-hmm. We love to see our stats go up in that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Today's episode, What's Real Knowledge, was inspired by things Alison told me she saw. So I'm going to just let you talk about it.
I have been seeing videos on social media of people who try to get their children to repeat things to them, calling that language development.
Imitation.
Yeah.
Is a part of developing language.
Yes, but I don't think it's the whole of it. So this is more like them, instead of having real conversations with the children, they will say the exact same phrase at the exact same time every day. And eventually the child's like, oh, she's doing this, therefore I must have to say this because she always says this at this time. And they think like, oh, look, I taught my child how to talk. So
is it like it's lunchtime, every day you say, do you want milk?
Every day.
And then the child will eventually say, want milk?
Yes.
It's just because you said it?
Yes. So like.
Is that what they're doing?
That's what they're doing every day.
Let me think of a better example because the child might actually want milk. Let me think of a better example.
Yeah.
Like if you go by a window every afternoon, you would repeat the same thing, something like the birds are flying by?
Yes, you would repeat the same exact phrase and the exact same wording every day as you pass that window. And eventually the child passes the window and says the same exact phrase that you've been saying every time you pass the window because they think, oh, well, I'm by a window, I must have to say this.
So what you're teaching them is memorization and imitation,
Yes.
both of which not both of which. I'm going to correct that. Imitation has value.
Yeah.
But we want to depart from that.
Right.
We need the children to sort of take it and run.
Yes. Well, I also got a little concerned watching this that like if this is the only way people are communicating with their children, they're not really having real conversations. And I'm like, oh, how sad for the children. Because I'm like, if you just talk to them, they'll learn language, right? Like, so, but just, that's not real conversation. That's not modeling real communication.
You know what this sort of reminds me of? There was a product years ago.
Okay.
That alleged that it could teach babies to read. And so you would hold up pictures, like two pictures, and name what's on those pictures.
Right.
Like maybe, I don't know, a cow and a flower. right?
Okay.
Like cow flour, cow flour, cow flour. And then you would say to the baby who cannot speak yet, which one is the cow? Which one is the flour?
They would point.
And they would point, and people would be like, my baby's reading. No,
No, your baby's not reading.
your baby's not reading.
Yeah.
Your baby has memorized something. Plus,
Yeah.
you tend to motion a certain way.
Right.
When you want them to
Right.
point to something.
Right.
But it's reminding me of that people were thinking, oh, I taught my child to read when
Right.
actually they had memorized things. And if they can't take that information
Right.
and use it randomly,
Right.
they have not learned it.
Learned it.
It's
Yeah.
the same for learning alphabet. I could memorize A, B, C, D, E, F. If I show you a random letter out of any
Right.
kind of order and you can't name it, you have not
You have
learned
not learned
alphabet.
it. Yes, that is true. That is true.
Right? So, like you're saying, if all you're doing all day is repeating phrases and you can't, the child repeats, says it,
Says it.
but they can't take it out of the context
Right.
and then come up with their own sentences.
Correct.
The children is, so in these videos you saw,
Yeah.
the child or children are not coming up with their own phrasing.
No, they are repeating basically what they've kind of had drilled into them, that like when this situation occurs, we say this because I say this every time. And there is no like thought of like what we're saying. Like, don't you want your child to think like, oh, I want to say this now? But sometimes I feel like the child thinks they can't say other things. Like they're not allowed to because we're by the window. We must have to say the bird is flying right now or whatever it is. And it's like, no. It was a very...
No, we want to have enriching conversation with
Yes.
children.
Yes.
Enriching conversation with children encourages their input.
Yes.
It's when we ask them good, open-ended questions so that
Right.
they have to think.
Right. There's like no thinking going on to me in
Yeah.
this.
We want them to have
You
to
know?
think about what they're going to say.
Yeah.
We want them to express original ideas.
Yeah.
Imitation usually leads to pretend play, though imitation, when you think about it, a lot of learning starts as imitation,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But then we need the people to be able, it's like planting seeds. We need to
Yeah.
plant the seed with imitation sometimes,
Yes.
but then we need to see if they can run with it. What can you
Right.
do with this information now?
Right. Like, yeah, because I think it applies to other things too, right? I think it does apply to reading, like you were saying. Like, you know how like children, when they're at a certain age, they like memorize the book.
They do. They memorize the
But
book.
that
But
doesn't
they
mean
think that's what you're doing when you read.
Right. But that doesn't mean they're reading it,
Right.
right? So like there's a difference between reading the word and knowing what the pages mean, right? So like there's that, like that's, but that, what did I say? Like doing the whole, like going by the pictures and all that is part of reading development. Like they have to go through that in order to get to the next step, right? That's part of it. So
Right.
I'm not saying like they shouldn't be like repeating or imitating things, but eventually it has to be like a building block to like, here's the next part,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
So just having your child repeat a word every time you walk by a window it's not building anything. It's just like, okay, this is what we say and that's it. And there's no thought. There's no...
I think there are some situations where it's appropriate. Like you teach children when someone hands you food, always say thank you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. But eventually they should know that that's just what we do, right? Like, and be able to apply it on their own.
They need to understand the meaning behind
Yes.
it.
And if they don't...
Children
then-
don't, when you just say thank you or say I'm sorry or say whatever or say hello, they don't understand the meaning
No.
behind it.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe that's the difference.
Maybe that's the difference. Yeah.
They need to understand. When children understand the meaning behind what they're saying, then they can expand upon it.
Yes.
If they're not expanding upon that imitation,
Right.
then they don't understand,
understand
the
it.
meaning or the purpose of what they're saying. And so
Right.
what's the point?
What's the point?
Right.
Right.
What is the point?
And to me, it's almost like you created this little party trick, I think. Like, hey, look what my child can do and say, but not actually teaching them the real knowledge of things.
The use of language is all about conversation.
Yeah.
How complex is your conversation? How long is your conversation?
Yeah.
How much back and forth? Young children can't do a lot of back and forth and stay on the same topic
Right.
for long.
Right.
Right? So we want to constantly extend that back and forth. And one of the ways we do that is by asking them compelling questions.
Yes.
So, which is very different than I'm going to make a statement and ask you to repeat it.
Yeah.
It should be, I'm going to ask you a compelling question that makes you curious
Right.
about either something in the world or something you've done,
Right.
and see what you say. And then I'm going to say something back.
Right. And to me, like when you ask these compelling questions, like you could see the wheels turning, right? And we're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm going to think of an appropriate, relevant answer to this. Just having them repeat things, there's no.
It's also math is the same way, right?
Yeah.
So for way too long, we sat children down like in a large group time and
Yep.
we counted numbers that were hung up on the wall, like on a calendar.
Yeah.
That does not prove that they understand numbers.
Right.
What shows that they understand numbers is if I take you over to the table and I say, this is the number 3, can you count me out 3 Legos?
Yep.
And they can successfully do it, then they understand what 3-ness is.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What is 3?
Yes.
That's why we've taken in so many early childhood programs now, thankfully.
Yeah.
We don't see the calendars up anymore.
Yes.
It's not a good use of their very short attention
Right.
span.
Yeah.
So math is very much the same way. Like you can memorize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Right.
But unless you can
But
show me
don't actually-
7 items, you haven't
Yeah,
proven.
you don't know what 7 actually means.
Right. Unless you
Right.
can count out for me. And I'm not saying gather items and go, that's 7. I'm saying that they need to sit and go 1, 2,
Yeah,
3
one-to-one
with items.
correspondence with the items. Yes.
Right. 1-to-1 correspondence with the items is what that is. So there are so many things that we've asked children to memorize in the past that we now realize we know they need to be applying that information to fully understand it.
Yeah.
Letters are the same way. Letter of the week, we don't,
Yeah.
that is not recommended anymore.
Yeah.
It is simply not.
Yeah.
And there's even, I think there's a link on our website in the listener resources with articles or an article about
yeah.
why not letter of the week anymore.
Right.
That memorization did not help teach children to read in the most effective way.
Right. It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Because memorization is the lowest form of knowledge.
Yeah.
We know that if you've not heard of it, there's something called Bloom's taxonomy.
Yeah.
And there's a piece of Bloom's that speaks to us about knowledge.
Yeah.
What is the lowest level of knowledge? What are the higher levels of knowledge? And they recently revised Bloom's,
Yeah,
by the
they
way.
did. Yeah.
So the lowest level of knowledge is remembering something.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Memorization,
mean
yeah.
you can do the other layers of knowledge, which are understanding it, applying it, and then now there's multiple things on the top level of Bloom's, which are the highest level of understanding something is being able to create with it, evaluate it,
Yeah.
and analyze based on it.
Yeah.
Which is like compare, contrast. When children
Yeah.
can compare and contrast, they're analyzing.
Yes.
And that tells me you understand that item now.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If I give them different size blocks that are of different colors and they can compare, contrast them, and sort them into different categories, they fully
Now they
understand all that.
Yes. Yes.
If we aim toward memorization, like you're saying, that
Right.
sort of imitation,
Right.
you are at the lowest level of knowledge.
Yeah.
And again, you can look up, it's called Bloom's, BLOOMS, taxonomy, TAXONOMY,
Yeah.
Bloom's taxonomy. And maybe what I'll do on our website is put an image of the most
Okay.
current version of
Yeah.
Bloom's.
That's a good
So
idea.
you all can see what
Yeah.
you can go there by the
Yeah.
time this is up.
Yeah.
Probably well before.
Yeah.
You would be able to go to our listener resources and see what I'm trying to describe.
Right.
Just know that simply memorizing something and spitting it back is the lowest form of
Right.
knowledge.
Right.
The example I always use when I explain this to educators is high school chemistry. I memorized a whole bunch of stuff. I spit it back. I got an A. Today, all I know is like hydrogen is H, oxygen is O, and water is H2O. That's all I got.
Yeah, she remembers. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it was just memorization.
Yeah.
It was not attached to any kind of meaning.
Yeah. I feel like that, but like when we were kids, they used to have us memorize the multiplication table.
Yeah, they did.
But didn't actually always teach us how to multiply.
Here's the piece that was missing. So I think it's valuable that I have memorized the multiplication tables. I do.
Right.
Like that I can sit and look at you and say 7 times 3 is 21. I think that has value.
Yes.
The piece that some children don't get or need to spend more time doing, I think,
Right.
than we do, instead of just ensuring that they memorize, also please ensure that they know that 7 times 3 means 7 plus 7 plus 7.
Yes.
Or 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3
Yes.
plus, right?
Yes.
And I remember doing that in school. I remember them
remember
saying
that,
this is
yeah.
what multiplication means.
Yeah.
But we spent more time memorizing
it. Yes.
than we did actually saying, well, what would this look like? What
Right.
does it mean?
Right.
Right here, do something where you're showing me what it
Right.
means.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah.
And even when we're teaching something like addition, like I can look at you and I can just say to you, like, 8 plus 3 is 11.
Yeah.
I've memorized it.
Yes.
You need to sit with manipulatives with the children and
Right.
show them this over and
Yes.
over so that they fully integrate it.
Yes.
It's kind of like why we use environmental print instead of
True.
letter of the day. Y'all look
Yeah,
that up
look
and look
that
back in
up.
this podcast.
Yeah.
It's, so if you're talking about people are trying to teach language just through repetition,
Yes.
there has to be more than repetition.
Yes.
Folks, that's not going to do it.
No.
And don't you think that children, if they're just repeating what you say, they're not going to know what to say in any situation?
No, and I feel
They're
like
not going to have an original thought.
it's going to be very robotic, right? It's
Yeah.
not going to have a flow. There's not going to be, there's no thought there. It's just,
You know
they're
why?
not going to know how to have a conversation with somebody.
There's a difference between using language and pronouncing words. What you're
Correct.
doing when you repeat back what you've memorized is pronounce a word correctly,
Yeah.
which I probably did in chemistry class too.
Yeah.
I learned how to say magnesium. That doesn't,
That doesn't mean you know what magnesium is.
I have no idea what it
I
is.
have no idea what it is.
I don't know.
But I could read that word.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Right. Think, folks, how many things in your childhood that you learned in school or at home did you simply memorize, spit back at people, get 100% on something or an
Yep, and I
A,
never thought of
And
it
you-
ever again.
and you have no use for it? You
Yeah.
have no idea.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a lot of
A
things.
lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that, if you're thinking, oh, my child repeating exactly what I say all the time at every given moment, because that was, I said the birds are flying quickly every day until they said it. That's a tiny piece
Yes.
of language development at best.
Yeah.
At best.
At best.
Yeah. And if you work in an early childhood program where families are touting doing this, share this episode.
Yes.
And let them think about it. This is, I like to give people food for thought.
Right.
So let them think about it. And if you want to know where to find those listener resources, you're going to go to our website. And Alison took the cue and moved her head out of the way. If you go to
getting better.
YouTube, there's a QR code you can hold your camera on your mobile device up to get all the links. You can also simply go to howpreschoolteachersdoit.com. And by the way, we release episodes a little early on Spaces by Wix on that app.
Yeah.
If you go to our website, there's instructions on there. It's right in the menu.
Very easy to do.
How do you get that app so that you can go directly to
Yep.
these episodes, and the videos for episodes are released a little ahead of
Little
time.
Early.
Yeah, little bit.
Early access.
Yes, we do enjoy that.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee how early or which day, but
it's there
it does
early.
get released early. You know where to find us.
Yeah.
Catch you next time on the podcast.
Bye, peeps.